Sophie Bennett thought she was flying to Egypt for a joyful wedding, but within 90 days her name would no longer appear on invitations. It would appear in newspapers, tied to a mystery that exposed secrets darker than anyone imagined. Sophie Bennett had always been known for her independent spirit. At 29, she had traveled across Europe for work and pleasure, often preferring to go alone rather than wait for others to join her. Her friends admired her courage, though her family sometimes worried about her adventurous streak. When the invitation arrived for a close friend's wedding in Cairo, Sophie saw it as the perfect chance to experience something new. She had never been to Egypt before, and the thought of exploring a country filled with ancient history, vibrant markets, and grand celebrations thrilled her. She booked her flight without hesitation, choosing a modest hotel near the heart of the city. Before leaving London, she shared her excitement on social media, posting pictures of her neatly packed suitcase, her passport, and her bright smile at the airport. Friends teased her about finding romance abroad, while her parents asked her to stay careful. Sophie laughed off the concerns, promising she would keep in touch. The flight to Cairo was long but comfortable, and she spent most of it reading about local customs and places she hoped to see once the wedding was over. She imagined herself wandering through the bazaars, tasting unfamiliar foods, and taking photos of the pyramids. When she landed, the warm air and the unfamiliar hum of the city immediately swept over her. She checked into her hotel and admired the mix of old and new buildings that filled the streets outside her window. That evening, she walked to a nearby cafe, ordering strong Egyptian coffee and watching the world move around her. Everything felt exciting, everything felt safe, and she believed this would be one of the most memorable trips of her life. She had no idea how wrong she was. The day of the wedding arrived with a rush of colors and sounds that Sophie had never experienced before. The venue was an enormous hall decorated with shimmering lights, flowing fabrics, and intricate floral arrangements. Guests from across the globe poured in, dressed in elegant attire that reflected both tradition and modern fashion. Sophie wore a deep blue gown she had chosen carefully back in London, something stylish yet respectful. As she entered the hall, she felt both slightly overwhelmed and enchanted by the scale of the celebration. The music, loud and rhythmic, filled the space as performers moved across the floor, drawing applause from the crowd. The bride and groom were celebrated with cheers and laughter, surrounded by family and friends who danced with joy. Sophie admired the energy, the warmth, and the generosity of the event, capturing moments on her phone to send later to her family. Throughout the evening, people approached her with curiosity, asking where she was from and complimenting her appearance. She smiled politely, grateful for the friendliness, though the attention felt more intense than she expected. In the sea of faces, one man stood out. He was well dressed in a dark suit, his hair neatly styled, and he seemed to appear wherever Sophie moved. He didn't approach her directly, but she noticed his eyes following her from across the room. At first, she dismissed it as coincidence, convincing herself he must simply be another guest enjoying the party. Still, a quiet unease lingered at the back of her mind. As the night went on, Sophie tried to lose herself in the music, the laughter, and the food, telling herself she was imagining things. Yet, when she looked up one last time, the man was still there, watching closely, as though waiting. 3 days after the wedding, Sophie's absence became impossible to ignore. Her friends back in London grew worried when their messages went unanswered, something unusual for her, as she always checked in during her travels. At first, they assumed she was busy exploring Cairo, distracted by the sights and culture, but when hours turned into days without a single update, concern deepened. Her hotel was contacted, and the staff confirmed that Sophie had not returned since the night of the wedding. Her room looked untouched. Her suitcase was still neatly packed, her passport locked in the safe, and her phone charger still plugged into the wall. It was as if she had stepped out for a short walk and never returned. Panic spread quickly. The embassy was informed, and her family was notified in London. They immediately pressed for answers, unable to believe that Sophie, who had traveled alone so many times before, could simply vanish. Investigators began piecing together her last known movements. Hotel employees remembered seeing her leave on the night of the wedding in high spirits, dressed in her blue gown, but she had not come back through the front doors. CCTV footage from nearby streets showed glimpses of her walking away from the venue, her figure swallowed by the night. Friends who had been at the wedding were questioned, but no one recalled her saying goodbye. Rumors began to spread, some suggesting she had chosen to stay with someone she met, others whispering darker possibilities. For her family, each theory only made the fear worse. Sophie's social media fell silent, her bank cards unused, her phone switched off. What began as a joyful trip to celebrate love had suddenly turned into a terrifying mystery. Sophie Bennett had disappeared without leaving a single trace behind. Investigators turned their attention to the wedding venue, combing through hours of CCTV footage that captured the entrances and exits on the night Sophie disappeared. The recordings revealed something unsettling. Toward the end of the evening, Sophie was seen leaving the hall, her gown flowing as she walked briskly into the parking area. She was not alone. A man in a dark suit walked beside her, guiding her toward a silver sedan parked at the edge of the lot. Though his face was partially obscured, his movements suggested familiarity, as if Sophie trusted him enough to accompany him. The footage captured her stepping into the passenger seat, and the car pulling away into the night. That was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. When the guest list was reviewed, the man's identity did not match anyone in attendance. No friends, no relatives, no business associates of the couple could identify him. It was as though he had simply appeared at the wedding, blending seamlessly among the crowd until the moment he left with Sophie. Investigators noted how, throughout the night, he had been visible in the background of several recordings, always keeping her within his sight. Witnesses were re-interviewed, and a few recalled seeing him near the buffet tables, standing at a distance but never engaging directly with others. The car itself became the next lead. Traffic cameras captured the same silver sedan heading out of Cairo minutes after leaving the venue. The license plates, however, were false, registered under a name that did not exist. Authorities now realized they were dealing with someone meticulous, someone who planned every step carefully. The discovery both advanced the case and deepened the fear, because Sophie had left with a man who seemed to have no past, no identity, and no traceable life. The trail from the silver sedan led investigators to a quiet neighborhood in Giza, far from the busy streets of central Cairo. It was an unremarkable area, a place where life appeared ordinary, but one building stood out. The car had been seen parked outside multiple times, usually late at night. When police entered the building, they were struck by its silence. The apartment they searched was bare, with no signs of normal living. There were no personal belongings, no furniture beyond a single stained mattress lying against the floor, and the windows were sealed shut with heavy curtains. Locks were fitted on the outside of the door, a chilling sign that whoever stayed inside might not have been free to leave. As the team carefully combed through the space, they found faint scratch marks along the walls and fragments of torn fabric in the corner. The air was heavy with the scent of dust and neglect, but one detail confirmed their worst suspicion. Near the mattress, half hidden under debris, lay a delicate bracelet. It was gold with a small charm, easily recognizable from photos Sophie's family had shared. It belonged to her, leaving no doubt she had been inside that apartment. Neighbors were questioned, and their accounts only deepened the unease. Several admitted hearing faint sounds at night, muffled cries, movements, or whispers that lasted for hours, but no one had ever dared to investigate. Fear of drawing attention kept them silent, as they believed the apartment belonged to someone dangerous. For investigators, the discovery marked a turning point. Sophie's disappearance was no longer just about a woman gone missing. It was now a case pointing to captivity. Yet the apartment was empty, stripped of life, as though whoever had been there had vanished just moments before the search began. 90 days passed, and Sophie's case had transformed from a local mystery into an international headline. Her photograph, once filled with life and joy, appeared on newspaper covers in both Egypt and the United Kingdom. Each update brought more questions than answers. Authorities admitted they had little progress beyond the abandoned apartment in Giza, and her family grew more desperate with each passing week. Sophie's parents held press conferences, pleading for her safe return and demanding stronger efforts from investigators. Social media campaigns began, spreading her image worldwide under hashtags that called for justice and awareness. Speculation consumed the public. Some believed Sophie had fallen victim to a trafficking ring, her disappearance fitting patterns seen in previous cases involving foreign women. Others suggested she had willingly left her life behind, though her abandoned belongings and silenced phone contradicted such theories. Every article, every broadcast, seemed to create new narratives, but none provided the truth. For her family, the constant flow of rumors only deepened the pain. Behind the headlines, investigators pursued faint leads. They tracked the false license plates to several shell identities, each one a dead end. Witnesses reported sightings of women matching Sophie's description in different cities, but none could be confirmed. The man in the dark suit remained a ghost, his name and history still unknown. Authorities admitted quietly that whoever had orchestrated her disappearance was skilled at erasing trails. For Sophie, the clock had been ticking silently. The autopsy later would reveal she was still alive during much of this time, hidden somewhere in plain sight while the world debated her fate. But as the 90th day arrived, the hope of her safe return began to fade, and whispers of tragedy grew louder, preparing everyone for the devastating truth that would soon emerge. On a quiet morning in late spring, a farmer tending his fields along the banks of the Nile made a discovery that would alter the course of Sophie's case forever. While clearing brush near a narrow irrigation canal, he noticed something wrapped in torn sheets lodged against the reeds. At first, he assumed it was discarded fabric or waste carried by the river, but as he drew closer, the shape became unmistakably human. Terrified, he alerted the local authorities, who arrived quickly to secure the area. The bundle was carefully lifted from the muddy bank, and the grim reality was revealed. Inside the stained sheets lay the body of a young woman. Though the features were severely damaged by time and exposure, fragments of clothing and personal effects provided clues. A small handbag tucked inside the wrapping contained identification papers, and though worn, they bore the name Sophie Bennett. After 90 days of uncertainty, the missing traveler had been found, though not in the way anyone had hoped. News of the discovery spread instantly, shocking both Egypt and the United Kingdom. Cameras captured the somber procession of investigators removing the body, while headlines declared the case no longer one of hope, but of tragedy. For Sophie's family, the confirmation shattered the last fragments of optimism they clung to. The thought that she had endured months of suffering before meeting this end was unbearable. Investigators rushed to preserve every detail from the scene. The condition of the sheets, the knots used to bind them, and the placement of the body all suggested deliberate concealment. Whoever was responsible had not only taken her life, but attempted to hide it near the flowing river, as if hoping nature would erase the evidence. Instead, it became the final, undeniable proof of murder. The autopsy results painted a picture more horrifying than anyone expected. Medical examiners confirmed that Sophie had not died shortly after her disappearance. Instead, she had survived for weeks, possibly months, held in conditions that left clear marks on her body. Signs of malnutrition were evident. Her weight had dropped drastically, and her organs showed stress from prolonged starvation. Her wrists bore deep impressions, consistent with restraints, and faint bruising suggested repeated handling or confinement. She had been alive until only a short time before her body was placed near the river, meaning the world had been searching while she was still suffering in silence. The manner of death was chilling. Evidence pointed to suffocation, with fibers from the sheets found lodged in her airway. It was not a quick end, but one carried out deliberately, suggesting her captor had chosen when her final moment would come. The findings destroyed any lingering hope that she might have been treated humanely in captivity. Instead, the reality was far darker. Sophie had been kept as a prisoner, slowly broken down until her life was taken. Authorities released the results carefully, knowing how devastating they would be to her family. For investigators, the autopsy confirmed what they had feared from the start. This was not the work of chance or opportunity, but of planning and cruelty. Whoever held Sophie had the knowledge and the patience to keep her hidden, watching as the world searched desperately for her. Public reaction was immediate and furious. Outrage spread through headlines and online discussions, with many demanding accountability and stronger protection for travelers. Sophie's story was no longer just about a young woman who disappeared. It had become a symbol of vulnerability, and a stark reminder of the dangers that could lurk beneath the surface of even the most joyful occasions. Investigators turned their focus to the mysterious man in the dark suit, the last person seen with Sophie. Weeks of analysis finally uncovered fragments of his identity. At the wedding, he had introduced himself under a false name, one that led nowhere when authorities checked. But by tracing the silver sedan and interviewing distant contacts, they pieced together his real background. His name was Mahmoud El-Karim, a man with a history of slipping through systems undetected. Years earlier, his name had appeared briefly in connection with missing tourists, but the cases had never been solved, and he had vanished before being questioned. Mahmoud's patterns soon became clear. He targeted women who traveled alone, carefully observing them in public settings before making his approach. Records suggested he used multiple identities, rented apartments under false documents, and relied on local contacts to stay hidden. The apartment in Giza was not his first. Similar abandoned flats had been discovered in Alexandria and Luxor, each with faint traces of women who had once been there, but were never reported missing locally. Authorities now suspected Sophie was not his only victim, but perhaps the first whose case had gained international attention. Despite the progress, capturing Mahmoud proved impossible. By the time his true identity was confirmed, he had already disappeared again. Neighbors from the Giza apartment recalled seeing him leave one night with a small bag, never to return. Border checkpoints revealed no record of his departure, suggesting he had either bribed his way across or remained in hiding somewhere within Egypt. For investigators, frustration mounted. They had the evidence, the history, and even a name, yet the suspect remained a ghost. Sophie's case had brought him into the spotlight, but he was still free, a shadow that could strike again. Sophie's story did not end with the discovery of her body. In many ways, it only began. Her case sparked international outrage, leading to calls for greater awareness about the dangers faced by women traveling alone. Newspapers in Britain and Egypt published long reports on her life, her disappearance, and the unanswered questions surrounding her death. Vigils were held in London, where friends and strangers gathered with candles and photographs, determined to keep her memory alive. For her parents, returning home with their daughter's remains was the heaviest journey of their lives. They spoke publicly about their grief, urging governments to take stronger action against crimes targeting tourists. In Egypt, authorities faced growing criticism. How could a man like Mahmoud El-Karim operate for so long without capture? Why had the apartment in Giza not been uncovered sooner? These questions lingered in the press, with many accusing officials of moving too slowly. Though international agencies pledged cooperation, Mahmoud remained at large, his name whispered among law enforcement but never brought to justice. Rumors claimed he had escaped to another country under yet another false identity, while others believed he was still in Egypt, protected by powerful connections. Sophie's story became more than a tragedy, it was a warning. Travel advisories highlighted her case, reminding tourists to exercise vigilance. Documentaries and articles continued to examine the mystery, portraying her as both a victim of chance and a target of deliberate cruelty. For her family, the loss was permanent, but they vowed to fight so that her death would not be in vain. They funded awareness campaigns and pushed for safety reforms. Still, the lingering truth haunted everyone. The man responsible was free, and Sophie's final days remained a shadowed reminder of how quickly joy can turn into horror.